My name is Jen Tao, or people call me Jackie here.
Jackie. And Jackie, how old are you?
I'm 24.
Now, you just graduated from Calvin College with a major in what?
Political science.
Political science. But you're not from around these parts. Where are you from?
I am originally from Jinan, Shandong, China.
Now, Jackie, as a Chinese student here at Calvin College, you defied one stereotype that Americans have of Chinese people, namely that Chinese people are short. You're certainly taller than I am. How tall are you in feet and inches?
I am actually 6'1".
Wow, 6'1". And tell us about your parents. What occupation are they?
Well, my dad works in the construction business. He's a contractor. My mom works in retail, in clothing items and daily, day-to-day products.
Is she working in a department store?
No, she supplies things to different stores. She doesn't really work in the store. She has people man the shops and so forth for her. Yeah.
Why did you decide to come to Calvin College for your undergraduate work rather than staying in China? You're a wonderful student. Calvin was very excited to get a student of your quality here. You would have been easily able to pass the exams into China's finest universities, but you decided to come to Calvin. Why was that?
Well, I guess a few things were playing a part in this decision making. First of all, I really wanted to come to America because I thought this was the place for all that excitement and fun, such as the pop music, the movies. When I was, in high school, those are the things I loved. And then from a more serious perspective, I didn't feel quite enthralled by the educational system in China. I didn't feel at home going to a Chinese high school, and from the things I learned from people who were going to college at that time, I knew it wasn't the thing for me. And the things I learned about American colleges screamed to me, look, you need to go there because the educational system is more appropriate for what you want to do in your life later on.
What was there about the Chinese educational system that turned you off, that made you anxious to try a different way?
I guess it was the rigidity more than anything else. There was a hierarchy of relationships within the school. You have to respect your teacher, whatever they said, or things that you needed to remember and you needed to reproduce in order to get good scores. And you didn't have a choice over what courses you wanted to take, what direction you wanted to go. Everything was predetermined by the school administration, and just the whole atmosphere in school. Everything was focused on scores and exams and how well you obeyed the rules, which I was really bad at. I mean, studying might not have been the most difficult thing, but obeying those ridiculous rules, like sitting up still for 2 hours in a lecture, is just something I couldn't bear.
No chewing gum in a Chinese class?
No chewing gum, no listening to Walkmans, no writing letters, no reading novels during class, which is American rules as well, which I all did. And that got my teachers kind of angry. Although, like I said, I was a good student, with academic performance. But on the other hand, I didn't quite like the rigid rules in school. So that made me feel I was like a bird in a cage that I wanted to fly out, and America seemed to be the beautiful blue sky that I needed to fly in.
What would happen in high school when teachers would discover you listening to music during class? Or
it involves a bunch of punishments. Sometimes they kick you out of the classroom to sit outside for a day or so. Sometimes they would take your Walkman away, of course, or ask you to write. China has this sort of confession letter style thing that was a Russian thing, I guess, from 100 years ago. So we would write these letters to our teachers to confess our sins and then to make a promise that it would not happen later. The worst, the things that I fear the most was the teachers contacting my parents, because that sometimes was very embarrassing, and my parents weren't the nicest when they were contacted by my teachers.
What's the reaction of American teachers, do you think, if you're caught doing the same thing in high school or here at Calvin?
Well, I feel, at Calvin, of course, I was tempted to do the same thing. Sometimes certain classes were boring, and you felt, what if I do certain things? But because American teachers were so nice, that I myself felt so guilty and embarrassed that I just wouldn't do it. I guess it's a self-police type of thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe American teachers are just more smart, smarter than the Chinese ones, and they just use this emotional protection way, to help them.
No, we're just genuinely nice.
Okay. Either way, I just would feel too guilty to do anything remotely like that.
Good.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because you were afraid of bad letters of recommendation from high school teachers so that you couldn't get into the best schools in China, correct? Because in China still to this day, it's mostly just your test scores on the national exams.
Yep, absolutely.
You've already answered this to a certain extent, but what are classes like in America compared to China vis-a-vis the difficulty of the classwork? You already talked about the relationship with the teachers. Anything more you want to comment about?
Right. Well, I think on the surface, Chinese classes seem harder because everybody has to do an exam, a mandatory exam, to qualify for other schools. But American classes are as well challenging. It's just depending on what you want to get out of the class. If all you want is to pass American class, even in college, it's relatively less difficult than Chinese courses. However, if you do want to do a good job, such as doing a good research or getting honors credit, then I think you need to devote a lot of time and a lot of thinking into American courses. So I think it's unfair to say American classes are easier than Chinese classes.
You are not in the sciences per se, more in social science and politics and economics and so on. But Jackie, do you have a feeling that what we're told about high school students in America not on average being on a level with Chinese high school students in math and science, do you have a feeling that that probably is correct? That some educators say, many educators in both countries say that probably the average high school graduate in China is 2 or 3 years ahead in science and math knowledge of the average high school student, high school graduate in America.
Well, I guess it all depends on what people plan to do later on. I think in America, if you do plan to get into science and you want to have a solid math core foundation, you could do that. You could take AP courses, or it was a choice. Whereas in China, it was required of everyone. At the same time, people with enough brain power or enough dedication for the sciences was a good thing. You got what you had to learn early in your life. But I think it's unfair and sometimes even brutal for some students who are talented in other fields, who are not talented in math, and they get very bad composite scores because their math was horrible. And I knew people like that, and I felt sorry for them.
Mm-hmm. This is a big question, Jackie, but how is life different in America than in China? Let's take these examples one by one. And of course, this is generalizing about two of the biggest, most populous countries in the world, so obviously that has to be taken with a grain of salt, whatever we say here, but just in general, how would you compare housing in America to housing in China?
Housing in America is large. Even small apartments in this country are considered large ones in China. I guess if you look at the land of America and the number of people in America, it sort of makes sense. Housing in China is less spacious, but I do think because the space is limited, people are think a little harder of how to use their space. And maybe that makes Chinese people a little more space efficient than Americans when it gets down to housing.
Oh, to be sure. What about food? There's quite a difference in the way the Chinese eat and Americans.
Sure. America has a large variety of different restaurants, different cuisines, but the mainstream American food, in my perspective, is simple and sometimes is unhealthy. It's fast, simple, convenient, but unhealthy. However, Americans they have a lot of choices to go to different things, and America is so sophisticated in its health sciences that you can get nutrition information and suggestions on what to eat from different sources. Whereas in China, we have our Chinese food apparently is a lot better than the Chinese food here. But I think the awareness of healthy eating, the awareness of exotic eating, of eating different cultures, it's still primitive in China. People still focus on how to make a dish taste good, how to have a magnificent banquet without even thinking about what it might do to the environment, what it might do to your own bodies.
But on the other hand, the average Chinese person eats a tremendous amount of vegetables.
Fortunately,
great variety.
Fortunately, yeah. Although they don't focus as much. You know, you never buy vegetable and look at the nutrition value in China. It's just not a thing. Fortunately, the Chinese cuisine consists a lot of vegetables. So I think, although they don't care that much, it's hasn't done too much harm.
Did it shock you to find in an affluent society like America that most Americans don't eat that much in the way of vegetables? That it's said that 1/3 of Americans go a whole day often without eating any vegetables at all.
Yeah, well, I think that if you go to supermarket in this country, in America, I mean, the price between chicken and broccoli is minimal. In China, it's large, and I think that, I mean, you know, being economists in this country, maybe they should suggest the increase of value of meat or the decrease of value of vegetables. You know, you think that the cheapest meal is from McDonald's, and what do they have? None of them is vegetables. And what's sad is right now in China, the exotic food that they consider are things like KFC and McDonald's, and they're booming in China. Kids are eating KFC like crazy. So I'm seeing a lot of chubby kids, you know. I no longer think the Chinese people can boast this mechanism myth. No matter what we eat, we keep the figure. No, you know, if you start eating KFC or McDonald's from a young age, that changes.
Yeah, I was shocked this summer too to see the number of overweight Chinese children. What about friendships? Some of my Chinese friends say that what we call a friend in America would just be considered in China an acquaintance, that a lot more is expected of a Chinese friendship than an American friendship, that Chinese people make fewer so-called friends, but the relationships are much deeper. Has that struck you to be the case? And if so, is it somewhat disappointing to find that as friendly as Americans can be, perhaps the friendship doesn't run very deep? Or is that not fair?
Everything has its two sides. At the beginning, when I had expectations, my Chinese expectations for my American friends, yes, of course, that was disappointing because I thought I could develop my relationships the same way I did in China, which was fast, and you could deepen a relationship within a relatively short time. But at the same time, although Americans, I agree with you, being more independent, less attached and less deep, I guess, the relationship. But there is more of understanding, more of what I call respect, as the distance brings the respect and brings the consideration into a relationship. So my relationship, my friendships with Americans, although are not in a way as deep as my relationships with Chinese friends, there were certain things I enjoyed doing with my American friends more, because that nice distance or that respect for personal space, for personal freedom, has allowed me to fully expand whatever I have. And my friends respected that. So I guess I can't just say it. It depends on what expectations you bring into the relationship.
Very interesting. What about family life, Jackie? You've, I think, seen some of family life in America with your friends' families, and then, of course, growing up in a Chinese family in China, you've had direct experience with that culture. How would you compare the dynamics of, say, parents and children in the two countries, or between brothers and sisters?
I guess it follows the same line with friendships. In China, family almost throughout life, no matter how old you are, no matter whether you're married or not, this family structure stays very close for a long time. Whereas in America, once the kids grow up, they move out, they start their own life, they start their own finances. Once again, that's also a two-sided story. At the same time, you might feel a little disappointed that with even your own parents, you have to clearly cut your finance or clearly cut your responsibility. But at the same time, I think that fosters a sense of responsibility and a sense of personal freedom and independence that many Chinese people do not have. So to sacrifice a little bit of intimacy, there was also some other positive things. Whereas in China, I can say the same thing. We do sometimes have more family problems because we are so closely together. The daughter's problem becomes the parent's problem. The parent's problem becomes the children's problems throughout life. Sometimes it gets really tiring. But at the same time, that sense of enclosure, that sense of close-knit intimacy is truly valuable.
What about the strictness of parenting in China compared to America? Naturally, it differs by family in both countries, but in general, do you think Chinese parents are stricter? They certainly have that reputation. Is that a fair reputation?
Always strikes me Chinese parents, including my own, live by some myth how they raise children. They just one day come back thinking, I thought of this, like they had an epiphany or some sort, and they started treating you in an unexpected way. You know, parents were more emotional sometimes than their kids. American parents strike me as very scientific, very rule-oriented. And you know, this is a country of, where rule of law is ingrained, whereas in China it's more of a tradition, a culture, some sort of unspelled rule things that are guarding relationships. So I feel Americans tend to be more scientific, rule-oriented. Chinese people just go with their heart, say, we need to treat our children strictly, not because the book says so, but because we've heard about it. And that's how we were raised up. You know, it feels right. So that's why I see a lot more parents going away from this strictness and going with their heart to treat their children, spoil them to rotten, because they feel they wanted to rebel against the way they were brought up.
In China?
In China, yeah.
And especially with the single family cities, right? This is a big difference.
Yeah, China, you say extremes. Whereas in this country, I think parents treat their kids, first of all, with at least educated parents, I'm saying, with decency, with respect. From a very young age, they tell them how to behave. They tell them in a kind way. Rarely I see parents beating up kids in America, but rarely do I see kids just totally go against what their parents are saying. I know professors who talk to their kids. And if the parents tell the kids to do something, the kids usually do it. And if the kids don't do it the first time, the parents say, now, and they do it.
But in China?
They can say, now. And then the children will say, what?
What about leisure activities? How would you compare them in China to America?
Americans are more sports-oriented, much more leisure time, much more leisure activity than the Chinese.
What kind of things do the Chinese people do for fun?
Eating, going to restaurants, eat all night, going to tea houses, drink tea, and sometimes play a little mahjong. Mahjong is the tile, thing that you play, or sing karaoke, doing bowling. All these, not too much outdoors, not too much the real sports. More of these socially laid back sort of thing, whereas Americans, do all sorts of things, like sailing, fishing, hiking, golfing, so quite different.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the biggest difference is between life in China and life in the U.S.? That's a big question.
I definitely think is the level of independence. In America, you are expected and respected for being independent. In China, you're expected and respected for honoring your parents, being with them, being with your kids, being with your loved ones, and closing, or your friends, simple matter, for keeping that close-knit community.
What is the reaction of your parents and also your friends in China, or your parents' friends, to the fact that you've been here in the United States for 4 years now? You've gone back to see your family several times, but how is that viewed? Are you viewed as an unfilial son for doing that, or are your parents proud of what you've accomplished?
Oh, I think they're very proud of me coming and studying in this country, because it's viewed as a high achievement, but at the same time, there is a sense of expectation that after I graduate, I will take care of them, be back home, for that matter. So they don't necessarily view me as unfilial, but they would if I just say, look, forget you, in the future.
Are you an only child, Jack?
Yes, I am.
Mm-hmm. What do you prefer about life in the U.S. to life in China?
Oh, I like the environment a lot better. I like, it's cleaner, and it's also very spacious. I go outside, I never feel suffocated because there's so much space out there, and also a lot of resources that I can use.
Is your hometown of Jinan a very crowded place?
Very crowded, yeah, and polluted somewhat. Now it's getting better, but compared to here, yes, definitely.
Is there something that you don't like so well about life in the U.S.?
Yeah, like I said, I don't like the pop culture here. I think it's too pervasive.
What is there about the pop culture that you don't like, Jay?
Well, I think when there are movies and soap operas and music, there is always a message that is being conveyed. And people are doing it in such a creative way that they do it without you even noticing it. So many Americans who live in this most democratic, most free country are living an unfree life because their mind has been imprisoned a lot by those commercials that they see, those movies that they see. Americans, surprisingly, many of them who are in the world standard, wealthy, well-educated, healthy, have a bad self-image, lower self-esteem. And I think the reason for that is the TV culture tries to communicate to you, you are not good enough without what we're trying to sell, or without this or that. And that makes people inhibited and unfree. And I feel this is doing the worst to this country that was built for people to be free.
Very interesting. What do you plan to do after graduation from Calvin? Well, you've just graduated now, and you've been accepted to what graduate school?
Oh, I'm going to Columbia University Law School in New York City, so I'll be moving to the city in a while.
Now, you were accepted by a number of prestigious law schools.
Right.
Can you mention the schools that accepted you directly from graduating from Calvin?
Yeah, sure. I was accepted at Georgetown University in D.C., University of Michigan, University of California in Los Angeles, and of course Columbia. Yeah, I think that's it.
And those schools are, all modesty aside, are all in the top 10 law schools in America, are they not?
Yeah, two of them are in top 10, two of them are top 15. So.
Well, we're very proud of you, Jackie. Why did you pick Columbia?
Well, I guess definitely has to do with Chinese law. Columbia has supposedly the best China law program in America. Yeah, probably even the best international program in the country. Also, I felt after being in Grand Rapids, which I love, and Grand Rapids is a great place. I do want to look at America in a different perspective, and I think New York will be very different from here.
What are your plans after graduation from law school? Do you plan to stay in the United States or return to China?
I plan to eventually return to China to work in the legal field, but I can't imagine myself just turning myself completely to America. So what I perceive to do is a bridge, between China and America. So going back and forth. Yeah, but working in China or by large Asia is my vision.
Would you work for an international law firm?
At least at the beginning, yes. The government, I might try as well, because I really enjoy, diplomacy. I was interning in D.C. and did some of that too. That's something I enjoy doing as well.
Have you enjoyed your time at Calvin so far?
Oh, yeah, very much. It's a great time.
What are some of the memories, the best memories you'll carry with you?
Oh, I would say I was given a lot of opportunities here on this campus. I was directing shows like Rangila for international students, or I was giving the possibility to run the International Student Senate, to do Chinese drills with students, to introduce them to a different culture. Those things were just very good memories. And I felt, being a high school student, freshly out of high school coming here, I all of a sudden became the Chinese expert. And then people came to ask me about things about China. I felt honored, and I hope, I didn't mislead people into what China was supposed to, is supposed to be like. So those are wonderful things, and also in this country, being cared for and being loved by people of a totally different culture, totally different geographic location, is something amazing. You got to think, what makes us, although so distant, yet so close.
Mm-hmm. Just one last question for you, Jackie, and that is, this is a really big question, but in spite of your youth, you are well educated, you've lived in two different cultures, you have some perspective, and you're a thoughtful person. What do you see as China's biggest problems in the next 10, 20 years?
That's the same thing I say about American cultures, American society is the polluting of the mind. Not necessarily polluting, being brainwashed or anything, but being polluted by materialism, being polluted by immoral practices, being polluted by self-centric pursuit of wealth, fame, and applause without regarding the welfare of others. Now, I know that's good for society from an economic perspective. If everybody wants that, we will build the best economy. But at the same time, best economy doesn't mean best life. And I just would hate to see the future generations of China, including my generation and my previous generation, to suffer so much, well, their comfort increases so fast.
It did seem to me in visiting China again this summer that in spite of all the fantastic economic growth that we've seen and the dramatic increase in the standard of living for the average city resident, certainly, that most Chinese people these days don't seem to believe in any code of ethics, in any set of values, and certainly not in any religion, the vast majority of Chinese people anyway, and that it's a society right now that's pretty much cast adrift morally, is it not, where there is a lot of corruption, where there is no set of values that the society can point to and say, this is something we all believe in and you need to be accountable to this. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think China, especially a lot of intellectuals, have realized this scary problem, this horrifying social scene that morality is gone. Morality is being taken, is replaced by materialism, by the self pursuit of wealth. And I don't know. I don't know. I look at American history. I look at the slave days. I look at the Industrial Revolution days. America had to go through that before it really landed with a different system of looking at things. I don't know whether China could avoid that. I don't know whether China would be able to develop its economy, which is the focus, at the same time maintain a high moral standard. And that worries me a little bit. What I hope is we do it with caution. When you develop the economy, also realize there are other things involved, and teach our children that they shouldn't just worry about their personal gain. I mean, that's just one part of life. There are other things that need to be looked at.